In 1970, protests against the Vietnam War raged across college campuses, including UC San Diego. On May 10th, a sunny spring day nearly 43 years ago, one UC San Diego student died after he set himself on fire in front of his protest sign that read, "In God's name, in the war." It took another 3 decades before George Winnie's death was officially acknowledged by the university with a plaque. But as my guest, David Clouden, former UCSD Warren College instructor and curator Dave Hampton, will explain, today's students have a renewed interest in Winnie and the mysterious campus artwork he inspired. Thank you both for being here. David, how did you get interested? How did you hear and become interested in George Winnie?
Well, in 1999, I was a graduate student at UCSD, and I was teaching a course in the Warren College writing program about the history of the Vietnam War, writing about the history of the Vietnam War. And in the materials for the course that I had inherited, that course had been taught there since the 1970s, there was an article about George Winnie, and my students got interested in the history of that. And I knew that there was a site, a mysterious site on campus that was a memorial to him that was unlabeled. So I took them there from the classroom. We said, let's go look at it. And we went to visit, and the students were really impressed with what they saw, but they were surprised that it was unlabeled.
Let's talk about that sculpture in this area. Dave, there's a sculpture on campus that is attached to this, so to speak. It came a few years later. Tell us what this sculpture is and where it is and why it's attached to Winnie's death.
Well, there are a couple of sculptures that are installed in this place called the Winnie Memorial Grove, which is a little eucalyptus hollow between the library and the Price Center. And the artist that we're talking about, Virginia Maksymowicz, went out one day with a shovel as part of her master's thesis and installed a grid pattern of 30 ceramic blocks in the ground. She left an impression of herself as well as sort of daily objects from her purse, kind of to create a fake fossil record of a human life. No one knew whose human life. And that's there in the ground, but she specifically set it there in a memorial statement because of the resonance with George Winnie's self-immolation.
So when you found out about this, why, you're an art curator, you like 50s and 60s art, why did this particularly speak to you as well?
Well, the way that this happened for me is I bought a poster and some other ephemera. I'm very interested in San Diego art history, and I buy things like posters and catalogs. And someone sold me this poster, which had been printed as a commemorative poster about George Winnie, and I'd never heard of this before. And I was surprised because I grew up in La Jolla. My father was a professor at a local university at the time that this happened, and I'd never heard this story. And it galvanized my interest, and I thought, I bet there are a lot of people that haven't heard this story.
Well, David, your students heard about it. In your class you were talking about that, and that motivated them when they went out there and saw the art and saw the area to get this plaque going. And now there's a plaque there, a memorial plaque. How did that come about? What did the students do to make that happen?
I had 14 students in that course, and we were all standing in a circle looking at 30 blocks, and several of the students were, surprisingly to me, upset that there was no memorial. I think they identified with George Winnie. I mean, you know, they're young students. He was a student, and he had, you know, committed this incredible sacrifice and made this huge statement. And here he was, sort of completely shrouded in mystery with no recognition. And so they asked me why there was no memorial, and I said, because you haven't made the effort to get one put in. And then they thought about it, and then they decided to go ahead and, you know, go on that journey. And so they got approval from the they got approval from the Stewart Collection, who curate the art on campus, and they raised the funds, and they got the plaque put in, and it says, you know, that the space is in memory of George Winnie, and that he carried a sign that said, "In the name of God, in this war."
Let me end on this, Dave. Why do you think students today, they come across this artwork, why do you think that they care and this matters so many years later after Winnie's death, and also about the art?
Well, it's an amazing human story. It's a powerful statement and a tragedy relating to George Winnie, but the Maksymowicz artwork, I think, is particularly effective because she allowed it to be a completely anonymous work, and yet it can take people on this journey, the journey that we're talking about, in a way that's really quite profound.
It does seem so, and I want to let folks know where they can read more of that. But thank you both so much for joining us and telling us this story. Now you can read all of Dave Hampton's fascinating story about Winnie and the art installations on the UCSD campus by going to our website, kpbs.org.